What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, February 23rd, 2017. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. Sure happy it's Thursday. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Quick word of explanation about yesterday being a repeat show with no warning. About an hour before we were going to go on the air, all of a sudden Claire comes and says she's not feeling very well. And if you know anything about Claire, if she says she's not feeling well, she's not feeling well. And she was running a fever that was going up very rapidly, and we have a little blood oxygen meter, and her blood ox level was very, very low, sufficient to where I thought it was necessary to take her down to the hospital. And that's why we had to basically have a repeat emergency. And Claire's much better today, thanks to everybody who sent in their wishes and get well and everything. She's recovering. I'm trying to get her to rest. And unfortunately, I don't think she's going to be up to doing our third hour tomorrow as she normally does. But she's definitely a lot better today than she was yesterday. Must be something going around. Everybody's sick with something here, and John, our boss, is out again today. I'm going to be taking the first hour of his show, and Tim Spencer, who's the host of Rural Survival, will be taking John's second hour today, so you're going to want to tune in for that as well. What was really kind of disquieting for me is by the time Claire actually got to see a doctor, she was starting to feel better. And the doctor came on in and just sort of guessed that it's some kind of flu bug. And that lack of certitude was very, very upsetting. And I raised the possibility of an illness called histoplasmosis, which is a possibility because the windows behind the altar at the church where Claire's the choir conductor have this huge accumulation of old bird's nest, and they can be home to the spores that cause histoplasmosis. And I said we should check for that because it can present as the flu. And I sort of got a shrug, and they said, maybe. But anyway, they sent us home. Claire's feeling better. No doubt we'll get a huge bill for whatever is not covered by Medicare and the supplemental insurance. But it was almost like we were just sort of being run through the process, and we don't actually know what happened to Claire yesterday, at least with any degree of certainty. All righty, let's get into the news here. Trump is vindicated after the violent riots erupted in the Swedish suburb. It looks like a war zone. Apparently, somebody on a train in Sweden threw some liquid at some passengers, triggering some breathing issues there as well. And so Trump was right. Sweden is dealing with a lot of negative effects from their open border policy that's being covered up. And apparently, we're getting a confirmation from a Swedish police officer who came on out, and he was a senior detective, Peter Springair, said the Swedish authorities are covering up the massive crime wave among these migrants. And it's all to look politically correct. It's all to look good. It's all up to that. And he's risking not only his job, but jail, because apparently in Sweden, if you blow the whistle on the government's cover-ups there, they can put you in jail. Apparently at one point, police were forced to shoot at the rioters, and but the Prime Minister, Stefan Löfven, was on Twitter slamming Donald Trump for claiming Sweden had any kind of a crisis because of its open borders policy. Now, here's where it gets into the real twilight zone. According to Berkeley professor and former U.S. Secretary of Labor Robert Reich, the riots in Sweden were triggered by Donald Trump's comments. Everything was just beautiful in Sweden until Donald Trump said there's a problem, and everybody said, oh, Donald Trump says there's riots, let's riot. Let's go smashing property and attacking people. I mean, it really is ridiculous. Now, you've probably been hearing about how whiners among the Democrats are now talking about invoking the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office on the claim that he is mentally ill. Now, of course, all mental illness is subjective. There is no scientific machine that you can be hooked up to that will have a needle swing over and say you're manic depressive, you're psychotic, you're neurotic, whatever. It's all subjective by somebody who's talking to you. The guy who wrote literally the book, the Psychiatric Diagnostic Manual, which declares the desire to eat healthy food is a mental illness called orthorexia nervosa. That guy is saying that as far as he can tell, Donald Trump does not suffer from the distress and impairment required to diagnose that he has any kind of a mental disorder. So if this guy who sees the desire for healthy eating as a mental illness is saying he doesn't see symptoms of mental illness in Donald Trump, this idea of the 25th Amendment is pretty much over and done with. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And getting into the crybaby alert mode here, as it were, John Podesta is now out there still, all these months after it's all over, he's still out there trying to explain away Hillary Clinton's defeat in terms of anything that has anything to do with Hillary. And he's now saying forces within the FBI wanted Clinton defeated. It's all the FBI's fault. That's why James Comey came on out and reopened that investigation. Well, Comey's hand was forced by Anthony Weiner, who is under investigation up in New York for yet more of his sexting with underage girls. And the New York FBI, New York authorities found State Department emails on that laptop, and they basically said either the FBI is going to deal with this on the national level or we're going to go public. They forced Comey's hand. But the reality is, if Hillary and her people had been playing by the rules, there never would have been an FBI investigation. And what John Podesta needs to understand is the American voters are sick and tired of the Bush-Clinton duopoly. They're sick and tired of the existing political establishment that over the last 30 years has ground this nation down into third world status. Nobody liked Hillary Clinton. And no, she did not win the popular vote because of all the massive fraud that's been detected. Now, Chuck Schumer is out there. He was interviewed on The View, saying America's hope lies in Republicans breaking with Trump. He wants the Republican Party to abandon Donald Trump before 2020. And he's out there saying that Donald Trump's agendas are against what America is all about, which is a very fluffy, fuzzy statement. We're supposed to just hear Chuck Schumer say, you know, Donald Trump is against what America is all about. And, oh yeah, well, he's against, well. Now, my position is this. Dear Chucky, we the people can decide for ourselves what America is all about. We don't need you to decide for us. We don't need The View to decide for us. And frankly, we are a little bit angry at the constantly displayed attitude by liberals that they and only they know what is best for the nation, when we can see with our own eyes liberalism's failures across America and Europe. If you want a firm definition of what America is all about, it is in that Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But we are seeing a government that's literally in chaos and paralyzed by its own faction fights here. John McCain apparently did an interview with the New York Magazine in which he's basically literally declaring his hostilities on Donald Trump and everybody who supports him. Because John McCain is a globalist, and like all the globalists, especially George Soros, they see the Brexit vote and Trump's election as a serious impediment to their plans for a global government and a global private central bank. Now, Barack Obama, who has stayed in Washington, D.C., he did not, in fact, move out here to Oahu, to this very nice house that he somehow managed to buy, which is great for those of us on Oahu because the traffic jams around anywhere Obama is are just not to be believed. But apparently, Obama is organizing for action, and he's partnering with a Soros-linked group, Indivisible, to disrupt Trump's agenda. And you have to ask, at what point does this cross the line from political activism into outright subversive activity? Now, let's take a little bit look at the corporate media. There was a major Freudian slip on MSNBC. Mika Brzezinski basically came on out, was talking about her concern that the American people are starting to believe Donald Trump more than they believe the corporate media. And she was out there bemoaning the fact that if the economy worsens, if unemployment goes up, Trump could have undermined the corporate media's messaging so much that he can actually control what people are thinking. And then she says, that's our job. This needs to go viral. This lady on MSNBC literally admitted the job of the corporate media is to control exactly what people think. We've been saying that all along. Now we have them actually openly admitting it. Apparently, the Washington Post is claiming that the tarring of the Ron Paul Institute is some kind of Russian propaganda. Blame Russia, blame Russia, blame Russia. The article appears to be another step in the effort to deter people from looking at alternative, independent sources of information by labeling those information sources as traitorous or near traitorous. Now, they're not going as far as they did last time, where they listed a whole bunch of websites, including mine, as obviously arms of Russian propaganda, and they had to back off on that when their provenance fell apart. But that's the message out there. The independent media is the enemy of the country. CBS News' new motto is real news. Talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. But the reality is, weaponized news has been a curse on our society, going all the way back to Horace Greeley, to the abuses of William Randolph Hearst. And they all loved wars because wars would sell newspaper. They loved disasters. Now, interesting article was over at Slate saying it's time to give up on facts, because there's a more useful weapon to control the minds of the American people, emotions. So now they're moving away from outright lies to emotional appeals. And we've seen that used already. The drowned Syrian boy on the beach, and it turned out they relocated him to get a good picture, and it turned out the boy was actually the son of the captain of the smuggling ship. But they're trying to play you with your emotions, to make you feel sorry for this or that group, to make you hate this other group, to sell you another war. Now, the corporate media lately has started censoring their own comment sections, and in many cases removing them. Especially on controversial stories, comments will not be available, because studies have shown that the reader comments on a story have more influence over the opinion of the reader than the article itself. So the corporate media's answer is, well, we're going to chat out of here. You're spoiling our party here. Article out of KateHahn.com. The CIA plot against alternative media, basically saying that since the end of World War II, through Operation Mockingbird, the CIA has grown accustomed to controlling the information given to the American people. And they don't like the fact that they're losing that grip, that they're losing that tyrannical control. All right, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls here because the phone lines are filling up. Mark in North Carolina, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
How you doing there, Mike? Mike, two things. One about Insane McCain.
Yes.
This guy, you talk about the 25th Amendment. There should be some way of dealing with this guy, because this guy is not only insane, he's dangerous. He's out there. I think that he's violating what he's in another country where he wasn't invited to, Syria. He's trying to drum up trouble, and he's probably trying to reassure the terrorists that they're going to start being rearmed again. Okay, now they got Flynn out of there, and then they got I guess this McMaster's. I don't know who he is really that much about him.
Well,
I don't trust him.
Trump has issued a direct order to the Central Intelligence Agency: no more support or supplies to the rebels who are fighting against Bashar al-Assad. And now that doesn't mean the CIA isn't going to set up some kind of a smuggling ring. But for John McCain to be over there, clearly at odds with the policy of the executive branch, means he's in violation of the Logan Act. Just because you're a senator doesn't mean that you cannot be found guilty of the Logan Act. In fact, when Charlie Wilson was doing what he was doing over in Afghanistan, technically he was in violation of the Logan Act because what he was doing had not been approved by the White House or the State Department.
I'd even go further with McCain. I think he's guilty of treason. Him and his buddy there, Lindsey Graham there.
Yes.
I think these two clowns will, and I think they're dangerous. And I think that it's Trump. Trump has got to start really putting a hammer down. He's really starting.
He really does.
He's got to start arresting these guys because these are crimes they're committing. They did this leaking this information. These are crimes, and he needs to start arresting them. And he needs to start making sure they go to jail. And that would, I personally think some of these guys could actually be executed for treason in a firing squad. But I'd just be happy to have them put in jail. And stop this stuff with McCain being, well, he's a war hero. He's a war hero.
He's not a war hero. We all know that. He cooperated with the enemy. He made recordings for propaganda purposes. The only reason he was not charged with treason on his return to the United States of America was Richard Nixon issued a blanket pardon to all returning POWs, which was an honorable thing to do. But then McCain turns around and starts spinning this thing about how, he was, he survived torture and he can't raise his arms because of that. The injuries to his arms happened when he ejected from his airplane. He was sent to Russia to get the best medical care he could, and he cooperated with him. He's not a war hero. I mean, look at all the planes. Really look at all the planes he destroyed on the Forrestal. One more, and he qualifies as an enemy ace.
What, did he really? Did they really send him to Russia for treatment? I didn't even know that.
No. When he was captured by North Vietnam, they sent him to Russia to get better medical care than he could get in North Vietnam, and they did it in part because they knew his father was an admiral, and they wanted to sort of curry some kind of favor or good feelings with the admiral by taking good care of his son.
No, I didn't even know that part about them being, that they sent him for medical care to Russia.
Yeah.
See, this stuff all on the fake news media that doesn't come out like that. You know what I mean? They won't tell you that stuff.
No, of course they won't. Their job is to keep you from ever seeing just how corrupt and dishonest and crooked people in government are, with precious few exceptions, like Cynthia McKinney and Ron Paul, and Tulsi Gabbard.
Maybe. Yeah, well, what's his name? Robert David Steele. You know who he is, right?
Yes, I'm finding out now.
He says his nickname was Songbird McCain.
Yes.
So he got that for a reason. And I remember of the Vietnamese, the guy who was the warden of the prison there in North Vietnam. I think he was a colonel of some kind. He said him and McCain used to play chess at night. Now, I didn't believe it then, but who knows? It's very possible. What do you think?
Well, I think it's very, very possible. Most people's image of a prisoner of war camp comes from way too many movies about World War II. But if you're in command of a prisoner of war camp, it's in your own best interest to keep everybody relaxed and happy and as comfortable as possible, because then you're going to have less troubles to deal with.
You would think so, but I mean, remember, we're talking about a third world nation at the time, and who wasn't very happy the way they were being bombed and all that.
Well, we understand that as well, but just from a pragmatic approach, if you're commander of a POW camp, you're trying to keep things as calm as possible. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. We're coming up here on a commercial break. When we come on back, more about fake news, fake searches, and boy, wait till you hear what Google just did to natural news. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And this was actually going to be referred to a little bit later in the show, but since we're talking about Insane McCain, or Songbird, as his friends know him, remember how McCain has been leading the charge about Russian interference in the 2016 elections? WikiLeaks just released numerous documents confirming that John McCain solicited illegal campaign donations from Russia in 2008. And he solicited them from the ambassador who was assassinated last week. So there you have McCain in a nutshell. Russian interference in the election is only bad if it's helping his opponent, but it's good if it's going to be helping him. It's still illegal. And by the way, Russia did refuse because of that legality issue. All right, we're going to take a phone call from James in Tokyo. Aloha, James. Hajime mashite. What is on your mind today?
How are you, Michael?
Doing good.
Good. Sorry to hear about Claire's, illness.
Yeah, well, she's definitely much better.
I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
I was listening to your show last night in my bathtub, and I was about to call you, and I heard my own voice talking to you on the phone, and I was like, oh, man, the guy's not around,
Yeah, well, it was a bad scare because, first of all, Claire and I rarely get ill. Second, this was very serious between the high fever and the plunge in her blood oxygen level. And normally we like to stay away from doctors, but in this case, I figured this was not something that vitamins were going to be able to help with. And as I said, she's much better today. She's at that point right now where I'm having a hard time getting her to rest. But that's just Claire.
Well, you're a good guy and you're a good husband. I think you can do it, and keep that lady healthy because I love hearing that woman talk every Friday.
Yeah, me
she's
too.
Probably almost as good as you are.
I agree with you. She's probably not going to be able to make it tomorrow, but she'll be back the following week. Okay.
I liked your last call. I think McCain is a scumbag who is totally giving the false news to everybody in the media. And what do you think about that?
Well, I can't understand why the people of Arizona keep voting him back into office, especially after the Keating 5 scandal, but maybe the people of Arizona didn't. There's no rule that says election fraud is confined to the presidency. Okay?
Okay, that's all I have to say.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch
Mike.
over to Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. And don't forget, it's all about the children. Remember, during with this whole series, it's the children, Mike.
Yes.
And the white helmets. They just don't tell you that we arm the terrorists to kill the children. And when the refugees ran out of the country, it was for the children. What a load of crap this whole thing is, Mike, I swear. I get so mad,
Yes.
It's such a joke, and the same with the Ukraine, Those evil Russians invaded Ukraine. First of all, they didn't invade the Ukraine, but they always leave out the part how us, including NATO and the EU, was responsible for the coup in the Ukraine. That's kind of an important fact to...
No, the American people don't need to have their tiny little brains troubled with that kind of detail. They don't need to know that. I mean, that really is the attitude. That lady on MSNBC just basically admitted what we've known all along. They see their job as controlling what we think. They don't see themselves as informing us, as giving us information so we can make our own decisions. They literally see their jobs as controlling what the American people are thinking, and they're losing that right now, and that's why they're in a panic. Because a nation of free-thinking Americans absolutely scares the heck out of the establishment.
Well, don't you find it funny how all these indie theaters are going to run 1984? Where have these people been for the last 60, 70, 80, 100 years? We've been living in 1984.
Yeah, we've gone past 1984 at this point. All right, Dustin, I'm going to have to let you go. We've got to take another break for commercials. We're going to take one more phone call after that. Then we're going to close the phone lines because I have got a lot of news to share with you today. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to take one more phone call, then we're going to close the phone lines because I got a lot of stuff I need to get to. James in Charlotte, North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. I just want to mention a couple of things. By coincidence, I happened to be to watched a clip of the Morning Joe yesterday. You mentioned at the opening of your show about that remark that Mika Brzezinski made about the public opinion being controlled. That it was the job of the media to form public opinion, and really the show just went downhill from that. Everybody should take a look at the clip of that show, because Joe Scarborough went on to compare Trump to Mussolini and Lenin from the remarks that he claimed that Trump made, which he actually did not.
Yes.
Questioning the legitimacy of the federal judges that went against his immigration ban. And then he went on from there to say that our economy is built on illegal immigration, so we should go ahead and legalize it.
Boy, oh boy! I mean, that's the shark. Of course, I don't watch these shows anymore. I'll tune into Fox to see what the government's lying about today. But at this point, I don't pay any attention to corporate media other than it is pointed out to me by our readers and listeners. Hey, it's a big steaming pile of bovine excrement over at the Washington Post, and you got to comment on it. And I'll go on over and say, yes, it is indeed a great steaming pile of bovine excrement, and I'm going to comment on it.
Well, yeah, I just had heard about that remark that she had made, and I wanted to just watch the clip of the show, and then they just kept going back and forth around the table, and it just got worse and worse in terms of.
Why do you torture yourself by watching it? You know, I have somebody who writes into me every day about all the stupid things they're saying on The View, and I'm saying, why are you still watching it? You know, it's raising your blood pressure. Go on over and watch something that's a little more truthful, or at least a little bit more entertaining, because, you know, even if you're watching The View to yell at them, it's still being counted as a viewer and helping their numbers and their ad revenues. But at this point, we need to turn it all off and just stop paying attention to the liars at this. Because, again, they are very much afraid. They've declared war on the independent media, but all we have to do is ignore them, and their war on the independent media is going to be rather pointless. And anyway, James, going to let you go here. And before I move forward on this whole media war, I've heard this argument before that our economy is now dependent on the illegal immigrants. No, it is not, because the vast majority of the illegal immigrants are living on social welfare programs of one form or another, and you cannot prosper an economy by taking away from the people who are being productive to give to people who are not being productive. If we had jobs for every single American, and then we had jobs for the immigrants as well, creating something of value to sell to other countries, then you could justifiably say our economy depends on illegal immigration. But at this point, we don't have enough jobs for our legal citizens, and the illegals, by and large, are a burden on our current social welfare systems all across the country. And so the numbers don't work out. And it just absolutely makes no sense. Now then, getting on back to this, apparently Google has made the decision to purge its databases of all links to news articles on naturalnews.com. Now, Natural News is a website we go to on a regular basis. They have a lot of articles about toxic food additives, a lot of articles critical about vaccine safety and so forth, which is apparently why it's being done. Google has now decided that they are going to pander to corporate America by filtering their search results so that articles about the dangers in the products produced by corporate America are not available to the casual users of Google. Now, at this point, I don't use Google anymore. I use Yandex, and there are other search engines out there that are not using the Google platform. A lot of search engines out there are actually wrappers around Google itself. But you You need to find a search engine that is not doing this. And you need to start using it, because Google is now deciding for you what you need to know and what you don't need to know, just like MSNBC. Their job is to control what you are thinking, to make sure that you think vaccines are safe, that GMO is healthy, humans are warming the earth, and so forth. And apparently Google has done this to other websites besides naturalnews.com. They haven't gotten around to me just yet, but I figure it's only a matter of time. So you really ought to think about dropping Google and just going to Yandex. Now then, Project Veritas has started releasing audio recordings made from inside CNN. They've released 119 hours. They've got another 100 to go. And apparently the audio was being recorded in 2009 by an anonymous source inside CNN's Atlanta headquarters. They've got a mole inside who was just disgusted with what was going on. What has come on out now so far on the audios is CNN was misrepresenting polling data to you, the viewing public, which we certainly saw that on full display last year. Oh, Hillary's leading in a landslide. She's going to win in a landslide. There's no way Donald Trump can catch her. Wrong. So, the Huffington Post has now deleted an article that appeared on their website saying Trump was right about Sweden. Apparently somebody called up and reminded them of the narrative they're supposed to be following. Oh, open borders are good. Open borders are wonderful. There's no rape crisis or violent crisis or crime crisis connected with immigration. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the White House has now issued a directive to the Central Intelligence Agency to halt support to any groups that are opposed to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, mostly connected with that Free Syrian Army, 95% of whom are not even from Syria. They're hired mercenaries. And, of course, the Syrian commanders are saying, oh, it's only going to be temporary. They'll come back. They'll be supporting us. John McCain was just over here promising us the weapons would resume. And again, the fact that he's a senator does not mean that he cannot be in violation of the Logan Act if what John McCain is doing in Syria is not what Donald Trump wants done in Syria. John McCain's job is supposed to be Arizona. And that's it. And yes, he serves on some committees that have a national reach, but his reach and authority stops at the border. Foreign policy is solely the province of the White House and the Department of State. Anybody who goes on out and conducts foreign policy outside the authority of the White House and the Department of State is guilty of violating the Logan Act. They can go to jail for that. He should go to jail for that. Anyway, Syrian rebels have captured al-Bab from ISIS. The Syrian army is aimed at the ISIS stronghold of Deir Hafar. And by the way, a short while ago, there was a near-miss incident where a Russian plane and a U.S. Air Force plane came very close to each other, and the U.S. Air Force was saying Russia was behaving unprofessionally and they were being dangerous and they're being provocative. Well, they've had to back on down because apparently records of the actual encounter are showing it was the Air Force that was behaving badly and unprofessionally, and the U.S. Air Force Command has now apologized to the Russian Ministry of Defense. And, of course, it's considered impolite to mention that Washington was trying to blame Moscow for the incident early on. Okay, now then. As you know, last week, Russia's ambassador to the United Nations died unexpectedly. One day before his 65th birthday. Was a very energetic man in good health. Apparently, the autopsy has not been able to determine a cause of death, and they have now called for toxicological and other screenings that may take a few weeks. In other words, they didn't find anything obvious as to what he died from. They've ruled out the obvious things like heart attack and stroke and so forth, and now they're basically looking at the issue of, was he poisoned? And we have had 4 of these top Russian diplomats die just in the last 2 months. There's a lot of wet work going on by somebody somewhere. Certainly Ukraine's tantrum at the Security Council to block a resolution about this ambassador, Churkin, makes them look like they're guilty. Story coming out of Russia today is pointing out how Vitaly Churkin was very well liked. He was popular, he was energetic, he was funny, and anybody who met him would realize there was a serious problem with the corporate media's portrayal of Russia as always bad and evil and underhanded and nasty people. And by the way, I went through that too. When I was a kid, height of the Cold War, public school books were just teaching us all Russians were evil, all Russians hated Americans, all Russians couldn't wait to rip our heads off and all this other stuff. And then actually started meeting Russians, both through my work at NASA and then later my work in film computer animation. I was there at SIGGRAPH the first time Soviet students were allowed to attend. They were very nice people. I had no problem with them. I remember one time when I was working in Europe, I got snowed in at Frankfurt and got to spend a lot of time with an Aeroflot flight crew. And with the exception of the Zampolit, who was paid to be a jerk, the crew were quite wonderful. And I remember the pilot's son wanted to be a cosmonaut. And I had, on the outside of my travel case, I had a whole bunch of my pins left over from my days with NASA, and I took them off, and I said, here, give these to your son. He was very grateful. They're good people. They're just like us. Kennedy had it right. We all breathe the same air. We all walk on the same earth. We all cherish our children's future. Now then, Marine Le Pen is hailing Theresa May for avoiding a Brexit apocalypse. And Le Pen is surging in the polls. Britain's economy is doing quite well, in contrast to all the doomsayers saying that without that lifeline to the EU, Great Britain was going to be instantly destroyed. Now, the United States has dispatched the USS Carl Vinson carrier group to the contested South China Sea on what are called freedom and navigation exercises. China is calling this deployment as threatening and damaging because from China's point of view, that is the South China Sea. And there are numerous past treaties that say, yes, that set of islands and that part of the ocean does belong to China, going back to the end of World War II. Now, Israel has once again launched a strike with warplanes on the border between Lebanon and Syria in a pre-dawn raid, and we knew this was going to happen. As soon as we started hearing all this noise about bomb threats at synagogues and vandalized cemeteries, it was pretty obvious Israel was going to do something nasty because this is their pattern that they do. And interestingly enough, a nearby Muslim mosque has been raising money to help repair the cemetery. And apparently the Jewish Telegraph Agency ran a story admitting these bomb threats were a hoax. There were no bombs. It was just out there, oh, feel sorry for us, we're Israel, and even when we go and drop bombs in a conflict we have no legal business being in, you should feel sorry for us and look the other way. Now, last week we were talking about released documents in which Colin Powell confirms Israel has nuclear weapons, and now it is officialer. The Pentagon, after 5 decades of pretending otherwise, the Pentagon is now confirming officially that Israel does indeed possess nuclear bombs. So, all during that 50 years, when the government knew Israel had nuclear weapons, every penny of your tax money sent to Israel was illegal under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, which prohibit the U.S. government sending any kind of aid to nations in possession of nuclear weapons technology that refused to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which Israel has not, and refuses IAEA inspections, which Israel refuses. I think it's time we, the people, got a refund. Because our government had no business sending that money to Israel in the first place under U.S. law. And I think as long as we have Americans sleeping in alleys and eating out of trash dumpsters, the government has no business sending a single penny of our tax money to anywhere else on planet Earth. And to me, that is a big part of what putting America first really means. We take care of our own, we take care of our people, we take care of our infrastructure first and foremost. And if we have anything left over, maybe then we can be generous to other countries. But when other countries are getting vast sums of America's money at the expense of America's infrastructure and standard of living, something has gone seriously, seriously wrong. Now, Justin Trudeau is proving himself very pro-Israel, and it is in stark contrast with the Canadian people, who by and large tend to have a lot of common sense. The latest poll has found 91% of the Canadian people do not see criticism of Israeli government policy as anti-Semitic. They see it as criticism of a government's policy, which is the same thing I've been saying here. Only Israel insists criticism of what they do represents hatred of who they are and their religion. That's like trying to shut up criticism about Nazi Germany by saying you just hate Germans. That's how absurd it is, and yet Israel does it, and the corporate media lets them get away with it. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Let's talk about the economic news for a little bit. A very troubling article coming out of Investment Watch blog. Virtually everyone agrees that the current stock market valuations are not sustainable and that a crash is coming. And what they're talking about is an overvalued market. Now, in theory, the way the stock market was originally set up to be run, the price of a stock was directly tied to its actual value in terms of earnings, dividends. And you were expected to pay a price for a stock that represented a multiplier of that estimated value, so that over the years you would eventually recover the cost of the stock and then you'd be into profits. Long-term, steady investing. Unfortunately, when you are manipulating the stock market, when you're dealing with speculators who are buying and selling stocks and trying to ride the volatility, as it were, the market can get driven up as a whole, and the stock prices start to get out of touch with their real valuation. And that's where we are right now. Our current stock market, everyone's talking about the market soaring under President Trump. Well, a soaring market is not always a good thing if the underlying value of the stocks is not there. And it is rather alarming to see the Dow Industrials keep going up and going up when the actual basket of corporations that make up the Dow Industrial Average are all reporting lower earnings. So there's something out of whack there. The problem is when there is a panic and a run, prices are going to fall back down until there is some support. The more the market is overvalued, the more disastrous the crash is going to be. And they're absolutely right. All right, we're going to take one phone call. Apparently Mike Adams is on the line. Mike, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. It's great to join you.
Well, so what's going on?
Well, a fan of our website, Natural News, which has been banned by Google, heard your show and said I should call in and catch up with you on this. So I'm calling in. Thanks for the coverage so far.
Well, I mean, I use your website as a resource all the time. I link to it all the time. I think it is a very important resource. And I think what Google has done just absolutely reveals that Google has decided they are now going to take over the job of controlling what people know about health and food and safety. And, of course, I'm telling all of my listeners, stop using Google anyway, because you're not the only website they've done this to, and start using non-Google search engines like Yandex in order to find the information you need to make good decisions.
That's great advice. I think what we're seeing right now is that elements of the deep state can't really censor you directly, but they can push the agenda out to corporations who will play with them, who will do their bidding. And I think this is what we're seeing now with Google and to some extent Facebook and Twitter and others. It's mass censorship. They're trying to shift people's view of what they see as reality so they can control that reality, but they're denying people access to real truth. That's the problem.
Okay, Mike, can you stay through the station identification? I'd like to take this into hour number 2.
You bet.
All right, thanks a lot. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We are talking with Mike Adams from naturalnews.com. We're talking about the fact that Google has simply erased natural news from their search databases, and if they're doing it to natural news today, who knows who they're going to do it to tomorrow. Obviously, Google is siding with corporations that find information about the risks involved with certain technologies to be a threat to their profitability. And obviously, it's a good reason not to be using Google, to go to alternative search engines like Yandex. But it certainly is a dangerous precedent. And, Mike, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but it almost seems like there might be grounds for a lawsuit here in terms of some of the common carrier rules and regulations that information media are supposed to be complying with. Are you talking to a lawyer about whether there's an action you can take to sue Google?
You're right. We are talking to 2 different law firms right now and exploring the options, but we've also been contacted by many other websites that have been completely banned, outrageously banned, for no apparent reason, who want to take part in a class action lawsuit or antitrust action. We're going to be launching a White House petition within an hour or so that people can also sign on to. We want to communicate to the Trump administration that, the FTC might want to take a much closer look at this, because what we do know as a fact is that this censorship of our website by Google was a decision made by a person. It wasn't driven by an algorithm. There was no malicious code on the site, no malware, no infection, nothing. It was a person making a decision to turn off the entire website without warning and without justification.
Did they send you any kind of an explanation, or it just happened?
No, it just happened. There was no explanation whatsoever, no warning, nothing. And we're registered with their webmaster tools. So, you go through there's no message. They just turn it off, and then you have to try to dig around and try to find out what's going on. You have to try to communicate with them. We're at their mercy. This is the issue. And they can do it to anyone for any reason at any time. This is really nothing less than a digital execution or assassination of an individual or an entire library of knowledge.
It's updated Nazi book burning.
It really is. It's a modern-day book burning. It's fascism at its worst. We're watching it unfold right now, and I can't help but think it's because we have supported President Trump through the election, and after inauguration, we've been a pro-Trump voice arguing in favor of some of his policies. And I believe that's why we're being targeted, Mike.
Well, certainly the fact that Trump is trying to put together, or has put together, a vaccine safety commission under the leadership of Robert Kennedy Jr., that has got the $30 billion a year vaccine cartel very worried, and they're already trying to push back with puff pieces in the media. And $30 billion is a lot of motive to basically win at all costs. But what our listeners and readers need to be doing right now is making a big stink about this on all your social media, that Google is deciding for you what you need to know and what you don't need to know. I mean, I've been a big fan of naturalnews.com for a lot of years. Like I said before, I link to a lot of the stories on it regularly about vaccine safety, GMO, various other health issues. And again, for Google to take this step and not even provide an explanation of why, basically shows that Google has developed a very heavy hand. And remember, it's not like Google is without sin. They've already been caught rigging their readership numbers to improve ad rates, ad metrics. Now they're having to allow third parties to sort of audit that to keep their advertisers happy. We found out, certainly on Facebook, that their trending stories were not actually based on number of clicks on stories, but were just being arbitrarily decided by some of the people at Facebook. So we've seen YouTube artificially lower view counts on videos that do not conform to the current establishment agenda. They've done it to some of our videos. We've caught them doing it. We'll have 100,000 views one day, and then the next day it's down to just a few hundred. So much of the censorship has been very covert, but this is definitely a new escalation and made it very overt.
That's exactly what it is. What you've described in terms of them altering the numbers is what we call a kind of soft censorship. And they've been doing that for a long time, where they sort of covertly penalize natural news or other independent media news sources to make sure that the so-called mainstream media stories show up first. That's a kind of soft censorship. But this is hard censorship. This is wiping you out. And the most insidious thing about it is when people are searching for a term, such as thimerosal, the mercury in vaccines, they don't know what they're not being shown. In other words, if you see 10 results on a Google page, they don't tell you that they've removed the natural news link that proves the CDC knew thimerosal would damage some African-American children. They don't tell you that link's not there. So it's an insidious form of censorship where you as a user don't even know what you're missing. You don't even have a right to the debate. You don't get to read both sides of the debate and make up your own mind. Instead, Google makes up your mind for you, and that's a form of mind control.
That is exactly what mind control is, controlling the brain by controlling what it knows, so that it will come to, of its own free will, come to the conclusion that's been engineered for it. And we're starting to see where it is becoming very obvious what they're doing. And we have a saying around our little part of the world that the fastest way to bring down a dictatorship is to force them to act like one where everybody can see it. And we certainly saw it on MSNBC when that lady said it's the job of the corporate media to control what people are thinking. We're seeing it with Google banning your website completely from any search results. And I hope you get a class action lawsuit going here. And certainly we need the independent media to cover this story, because you're never going to hear a word about this in the corporate media at all. The corporate media is trying to reassert its dominance over what people are thinking. Obviously, Google has gone over to the dark side of the force. And again, you've got to start finding other search engines. You've got to stop using Facebook and all these other compromised platforms and start using these brand new startups in social media like VK, Gab. Somebody sent me a list. There's already about 20 new startups in social media that are making huge gains in the marketplace because people are fed up with their communications being edited and tinkered with and tampered with by these giant social media corporations who are obviously compromised and in bed with the established order.
Well, what happens, though, is even these small organizations, if they become very popular and they grow, they become a bigger and bigger machine. They need more corporate advertising to fund their larger and larger operations and server farms and so on. And pretty soon the corporations have so much influence with them that they're calling the shots. And that's what's happened with Google. You know, Google has been at war with natural medicine for a long time. If you try to advertise natural medicine products on AdWords, those are disallowed because they say, well, you're not selling FDA-approved medicine. So herbs and superfoods and vitamins and minerals and so on are considered almost contraband by Google. Well, whose interest does that serve? It serves the interests of the pharmaceutical industry, whose ads are allowed by Google. And whose search results show up first? It's the pharmaceutical industry or the official medical industry or the official cancer industry or the official vaccine industry, and on and on. So it's really being run by special interests, which are greed-driven corporations. Google once said that they wanted to be an organization that did no evil. Now they have become the evil that they once claimed to oppose.
They certainly have. Anything else for our listeners, Mike?
Well, just go to censored.news if you want to go directly to a lot of censored news stories that we aggregate from many websites. All of them are being censored. So the website is just censored.news, no ads, no tracking. That website's a great place to stay informed. And thank you for having me on, Mike.
All right. Well, Mike, anytime you have anything that's on naturalnews.com that you feel is significant, send it to me, and I'll make sure it's linked to from WhatReallyHappened.com.
Okay. Have your producer give me your email address for after this segment, please.
Okay. Just stay on the line, and Mike will get that to you. And let me just... I mean, it's the one that's at the top of the website, but I just gave it to Mike, and he'll give it to you. Thanks an awful lot for joining us.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, that was Mike Adams from naturalnews.com. And as we mentioned earlier in the program, Google has simply arbitrarily erased naturalnews.com from their search engine. So if you're searching for information on vaccine safety or possible harmful effects of GMO or nutritional approaches to dealing with various illnesses, you will not get the information that you need. Google has decided that their interests are best served by making sure that you are herded back into the arms of the corporate medical industrial complex, as it were. And that, of course, is denying you your choice. It also makes Google morally responsible for every single neurologically damaged child that is damaged by vaccines from this point forward. Google is morally responsible for that by hiding that information away from the American people. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And we're going to go ahead and start taking phone calls. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I wanted to see how's Claire feeling today?
Well, like I said, she's doing a lot better. She's not going to be on the show tomorrow. But she is doing better, and I'm just trying to get her to rest as much as possible.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I checked in late today, so you might have covered one or both of these topics. What are your feelings on Trump's selection of McMaster's national security advisor? It seems like he diverges from Trump on Russia, at least on Russia, maybe on other matters as well.
Well, he probably does. The question is McMaster's going to try and run foreign policy on his own, which is not his job, or is he going to do what the boss tells him to do? And so that's going to be the real question is, can Donald Trump get these people in line and say, you will follow the policies that are set by the White House and the Department of State and not wander off into the ether trying to basically do your own things?
Right. Because it just seems like, I mean, we've reached a low point where even people like Hastings of Florida and Maxine Waters have become neocons, whereas in the past they would be more likely to call for that money to be spent at home, especially in their districts. But now they seem to be all on board this train to war.
Well, probably. I mean, the reality is inside the establishment. They all realize what the real agenda is here, and that is that the United States, since the end of World War II and the signing of the Bretton Woods Agreement, has derived huge profit from the rest of the world by having the rest of the world use the U.S. dollar for cross-border trade and banking. Either these countries had to bring us manufactured goods or agricultural produce in exchange for stacks of ink and paper, or they have to borrow that ink and paper at interest from the Federal Reserve. And right now, because our own manufacturing has declined and nobody wants our GMO agriculture, the only thing still holding up the current U.S. economy is the rest of the world borrowing or trading for those U.S. dollars to buy resources and to do cross-border trade and banking. But more and more nations are turning away from that, and they're turning to the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan because they're now seen as more reliable and trustworthy currencies. And so the goal of all this hostility is to try and create a new bipolar world where everybody who's friends with the United States are still going to be using the U.S. dollar, and the U.S. will be basically parasitizing on their economies to keep going, and the rest of the world is going to have their own economies going their way. And I'd like to see it avoid turning into an outright war, but from the point of view of the money junkies, that is the only thing that's going to save their particular brand of ink and paper.
Yeah. Mike, two stories on refugees that were featured on Zero Hedge. first, did you hear about that Florida teacher who made that post about she was happy that there would be mass deportations of illegals, and she was reassigned from her school?
Yeah, I did. In fact, it's on the front page of What Really Happened right now.
Oh, sorry.
And it is kind of an area where I'm siding with the teacher on this. Because if she had made that comment in her classroom, then the school would have an issue. But she made the comment on her private time on her Facebook page. Now, the ugly reality is that while there are federal laws protecting federal employees from discrimination on the basis of their political views, there are no such federal laws protecting private ordinary citizens. But several states have got those laws, and so if you are being harassed by your employer or fired by your employer because you're a Trump supporter, and apparently a lot of that is going on, you need to check with your state laws, because you may have grounds for a lawsuit.
And then finally, Mike, I don't know if you're aware, you mentioned Martin Schulz, the SPD in Germany, has moved ahead of Angela Merkel. But strange thing is, it seems like the German voters are not turning against Merkel on the refugee issue because Schulz is all in on the refugees. He's even supporting their right to vote in this next German election. And he's ahead. So it doesn't say much about the German electorate.
Well, I think the German electorate is just sick and tired of Angela Merkel, and if they're not going to have a choice regarding the open borders policy with either candidate, then they're just going to go on their dislike of Angela Merkel. But if this open borders policy continues much longer, it is going to destroy the European Union. And, of course, that's not what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to blur all of the EU nations into one gray zone that they could put a single border around and say, this is now the United States of Europe. And it's, in fact, doing the opposite.
Yeah. But they have the AFD as the party that's against the open borders, but the AFD is polling a lot, at least according to the polls that have been released, they're polling a lot less than the SPD.
Well, again, there's no guarantee that the German media is being any more honest with their public than the American corporate media is with us.
No, true. But I see numbers, AFD perhaps polling between 10 and 15%, and SPD is up to 38, and then Christian Democrats
we saw the same numbers for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump early last year. Donald Trump was down there in the teens, and Hillary Clinton was way, way up there. And look what the reality of the election showed us.
I agree, no doubt. Okay, thanks, Mike. My best to Claire.
All right, I certainly will. Thank you. We're going to switch over to Charles in Little Rock. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, greetings from the occupied territory of Clinton country.
Yes.
Hey, I told you a screen that I want to talk about that $38 billion that Israel got. The first payment was made in January by the U.S. ambassador of $3 billion times 10. So figure it out, people. I did not authorize my scumbag congressman, United States Congressman Frenchie, a Republican from Arkansas, to do such a thing. I have here a letter from his office that said he supports Israel's right to exist. Now, I will scan this and put up on the RBN Facebook page so y'all can see what he's talking about. Now, Mike, my question to you is this. Any scumbag congressman that keeps giving Israel money need to be punished, and they need to be punished at the ballot box.
I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. But again, the problem is that electoral fraud is not limited to the presidency, and we've got to clean up our election system. Meanwhile, again, if your congressman believes in Israel's right to exist, he's perfectly free to open his own wallet and send them all the money he wants. But he is banned from sending Israel money by the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and the Glenn Act, now that both Colin Powell and the Pentagon have officially acknowledged Israel has had nuclear weapons for going on half a century.
Well, Mike, let me add this last caveat. People, you can stop these scumbags by voting independent, like me, Charles Neal, who ran against this scumbag last year in the 2016 election. I ran as a write-in candidate, and I was blocked from every debate, especially the one by Arkansas Public Television, because they know I'm going to lay into him about Israel. And I want to thank Rick Adams for letting me have a voice in attacking this scumbag, because that's what he is.
Yep. Not going to get an argument from me. Anyway, listen, we're going to have to let you go. We've got to take a break for commercials. We're going to come on back and take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines again because I got a lot of news to get through. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to take one more phone call. Then we're going to close the phone lines. Chad in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
You know, I've heard you say that you're not interested in 911 anymore, and I just wondered, when was the last time you put Larry Silverstein's video on your site saying pull it? You know, that's not important anymore.
No, wait a minute. That's not what I said. You're putting words. You're putting words in my mouth. What I said is it is dated, and that the emphasis ought to be on what's happening today. 9/11 is very important. It was the catalyst for this whole project for the new American century, the new Pearl Harbor that launched all these wars. Okay? But at this point, I would say the public consensus is that it was a gigantic false flag. We've been over that many, many times. And I really think that we need to be focusing more on what's happening today. And because, again, nobody believes the official story about 9/11. Nobody believes the corporate media about 9/11. What's the point in rehashing it over and over and over again as opposed to dealing with what's happening right now? That's all I'm saying.
So you don't feel that a barrage of Larry Silverstein, you know, you have the avenue to show all these people that we have this guy on tape saying pull the building, and you don't feel that that's important anymore? I mean, how are you any different than Google when they're nixing this guy off of Google? You know, when you nix something off,
hold it, Chad. First of all, when that tape first surfaced, we ran it a lot. Okay? But, I mean, if you think about everything...
You're not anymore. It's not important anymore.
It's not timely anymore. Okay? And, all right. Now, the difference between wanting to stay with current events and what Google just did to natural news should be obvious to everybody. Now, as far as Larry Silverstein, we all know what he said, and we did play that tape. And 9/11 is important in the context of how we got into the mess that we're in right now. But if you think about the sheer volume of events that have transpired, certainly since I began my website almost 24 years ago now, we can't be constantly recycling all of it. There's simply too much. We have to stay focused on what is happening today, here, and now. Otherwise, we'd be just like Israel that can't seem to get out of reliving World War II over and over and over and over again. All righty, we're going to close the phone lines here for a little bit. Getting on back to the economic news. We are getting rumblings that Janet Yellen may start jacking the rates over at the Federal Reserve as a means to derail Donald Trump's attempts to finance the rebuilding of American industry and American infrastructure. And if she does do that, I would strongly recommend to Mr. Trump that he invoke his authority as president to have the Treasury issue a new currency, just like John Kennedy did, one that is not borrowed at interest from the private central bank. In fact, Ellen Brown has already run the numbers. And if Donald Trump were to create a new currency to fund his proposal for infrastructure improvement, and I'm sure you'll agree with those people in California, they need it, it would cut the cost in half. Trump has that authority as president. In fact, to be very honest, there was no provision in the Constitution that authorized the delegation of the money creation authority into private hands in the first place. On that grounds, the Federal Reserve itself is unconstitutional. And unfortunately, the Federal Reserve tends to think they're running the country. We actually had a video a while back of Alan Greenspan acknowledging the Federal Reserve answers to no federal government authority. By the way, did you know they don't even pay any tax on all that money that they make? It's in the Federal Reserve Charter. They pay property taxes only, and that's it. It's a scam, and you are all its victims. It's time to become private central banking heretics. Heretics, heretics. All right, we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, interestingly enough, Moody's is saying that Europe's economic recovery is threatened by the rise in populism, because the European Central Bank has made debt slaves of everybody in Europe, and now they want to spoil the party by leaving. Great Britain is leaving, France is talking about leaving, and so forth and so on. The debt slaves are escaping. The debt slaves are escaping. Send out the slave catchers. We'll get them back. Apparently, soda companies and supermarkets have reported a 30 to 50% drop in sales resulting from Philadelphia's sweetened beverage tax. Now, if the sweetened beverage tax was imposed for health reasons, first of all, that's an area where I don't think government really has a right to meddle anyway, especially when so much of their health measures, like mandatory vaccines, have negative consequences. If it was a revenue-generating measure, they clearly did not think it all the way through, because apparently the sales drop has been so great that a lot of markets and convenience stores are having to lay staff off from the loss in profits and revenue. Family Christian is going to close all 240 stores after 85 years in business. And here's a very sad story coming out of Bloomberg. The Dallas Police and Fire Pension is now backing cutbacks to avoid a collapse. And they're basically getting on board behind this plan to raise the retirement age and to reduce the payments to these police and fire who are retiring. Now, all of this, of course, goes back to Wall Street's mortgage-backed security fraud. When they put together that fraud together, Wall Street's pet rating agencies rated them all AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. Pension funds did. The fraud collapsed. The pensions were defunded. And nobody has the courage to stand up and say, Wall Street made this mess. Wall Street ought to refund our money. Instead, they turn around and they're punishing ordinary workers by saying, you will have to live on less. Because that's always the first commandment of private central banking. You must make do with less so that we may have more. You must make do with less so that we may have more. You must make do with less so that we may have more. Lowe's is laying off hundreds. Their corporate office is getting cleaned out. And I referred to this a little bit before, but I'm going to mention it again. If you admit you are a Trump supporter, it may cost you your job. And apparently liberals who own businesses are basically taking out their frustration and rage at having Hillary defeated in the election on their employees. And here is where it gets a little bit unfair. There is no federal law prohibiting your boss from firing you because of your political views. There's a federal law that protects federal employees from discrimination on the basis of their political views, but no law for ordinary citizens. But many states, and these include New York, California, Colorado, North Dakota, and the District of Columbia, do make it illegal to discriminate on the basis of an employee's political activity or beliefs in or out of work. Anybody who's fired for expressing themselves, especially that teacher who got into trouble over a Facebook post she made on her own time, should check their state laws and file a lawsuit if they can. We cannot let this tyranny remain unchecked in our society. Even though it's being crowdsourced, you can crowdsource tyranny. That's what we're seeing with all these attacks on individuals carrying out their First Amendment right to freedom of speech. Now, getting on back to the economic news, apparently economists in Spain are saying that the ECB has really wrecked the place. Spain is going to be ruined for the next 50 years because of these crazy loans. And that is true of any nation that is enslaved to a private central bank. It makes you their debt slaves. There is no way to pay it off. Brussels has now issued orders to Italy to tackle their debt crisis or face sanctions. Oh yeah, that's going to be a good solution. Italy can't pay its debts, so let's throw economic sanctions on them so they can't even pay as much as they're paying now. Good thinking there. Now, Ukraine's economy is on the brink of collapse because apparently Ukraine and its steel industry relied very much on coal being supplied from Donbass. Well, obviously, while Kiev is making war on the Donbass, the coal is being blockaded. It's not being sent on through. And they're running out of their stockpiles, and Kiev's steel industry is on the verge of a shutdown. Now, here's an interesting little story. This came out of LinkedIn. And it's talking about France is considering a law that will make your private time out of your office private time. Your private time. And this is being done in response to the growing problem in the age of the Internet of employers treating their employees as if they're on call 24 hours a day by virtue of reaching them through the cell phone or over the Internet. And a lot of workers are saying, my job description doesn't include that. I'm not paid to be on call. I need my own private time to go on out and do private things without fear that my boss is going to call and say, you got to come in and deal with a client or a problem at this particular point. And France is now looking at passing a law saying that if your job is supposed to be from 9 to 5, outside those hours, it is illegal for your boss to contact you to ask for more work. I think it's a good idea. I think it's a very good idea. I think France has one of the best environments for ordinary workers of any country on earth. Now, the Dutch members of Parliament are getting ready to force through this EU deal that will grant Ukrainians visa-free access to Europe, even though it was voted down by an overwhelming majority of voters in a referendum. We are already seeing this attitude that the voters don't matter in the EU, only what Brussels wants matters. Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil. Now then, in a letter sent home to all parents, Chicago Public Schools are promising they will obstruct the enforcement of federal civil immigration law on their campuses. This is a violation of Title VIII, and those school administrators ought to be arrested. But I understand why the schools are doing this. It's more than just schools being part of the liberal establishment. Schools' budgets are determined by how many students are in those classrooms. And currently, it doesn't matter if those students are legal citizens or not. They just want to get more of them in there because then they get more money. I would strongly recommend to Donald Trump that he either seek a law or a rule or even an executive order saying that the budget for public schools is based on the number of students enrolled in them who are legally allowed to be in this country. If they're not supposed to be here, they're not counted for the purposes of allocating the school budget. That'll change the problem real quick. Now then, as far as the sanctuary cities who are still insisting we're going to be sanctuary cities and there's nothing you can do about it, well, apparently over in Denver, they've had a little bit of a kerfuffle because Denver released Ever Valles, 19 years old, from prison, saying we are not going to keep this guy in jail. The ICE had requested him to be kept jailed for pending deportation, and Denver said, we're a sanctuary city, we're letting him out. And Ever Valles went on out after being released, and he killed Timothy Cruz, 32. A little bit of an embarrassment there. Now, there was this very ugly story that came out of Russia Today where Rezas Abdullah approached Rebecca Telford, who had a baby, and this was in South Shields, Newcastle Crown Court, basically spit in the face of the 9-month-old baby, shouting, white people shouldn't breed. And apparently the court let him go. He avoided jail. So how is that open borders idea working out for you? Now, up in Canada, Tory leadership hopeful Stephen Blaney is proposing a crackdown on illegal immigrants, and they're already complaining that illegal immigrants in the United States who are now afraid of being deported because of Trump's new policies are now sneaking into Canada. So now it's becoming their problem, trying to enforce their border. And Blaney is proposing giving Canadian authorities the right to immediately hand over illegal immigrants to the U.S. and increase the number of Canada's border service agents. Now, the FBI has announced that they've charged a man in Missouri with trying to plan a terrorist attack on President's Day. And apparently, how this happened, we've seen this pattern before. This guy named Hester was posting inflammatory messages online in which he said he'd converted to Islam, he didn't like the United States. FBI agents working undercover contacted him to ask him whether he wanted to participate in a terrorist attack. In other words, the FBI found another patsy and set him up to be arrested for the headlines. It's entrapment. There is absolutely no indication that this guy, if he had not been encouraged by the FBI, would have ever actually done anything. Because let's be very honest, people who are really seriously considering a terror attack, they're not going to talk about it on social media. That's ridiculous. The people who are out there talking about terrorism on social media, they're living a private fantasy life. Political correctness is really getting out of control. Story out of Patriot Rising. Apparently, universities banned dorm room whiteboards to stop hurtful words. Now, whiteboards are very convenient. You can put up notes there about getting together with people, meetings, parties, trying to connect with somebody, for commerce or whatever. I mean, they're very, very, very useful, especially for people who don't have social media. But now they want to take them down just in case there might be a hurtful word. Another story coming out of Patriot Rising. Apparently, hundreds of campuses across the country are now encouraging students to turn in fellow students for offensive speech. They're calling it the bias response team. In other words, they're raising a generation of snitches, just like Nazi Germany did. Had children snitching on their parents, students snitching on each other. And of course, the problem is what one person considers offensive speech may not be considered offensive by somebody else. And you cannot have freedom of speech in an offense-free environment. Because if you're exercising your right to freedom of speech, there are going to be people who don't like what you're saying. Especially those with something to hide. They don't want the truth told on them. They're going to be offended. I mean, this is completely ridiculous. And the absolute nadir is down in Texas, where apparently the school decided to allow a transgender teen to be on the girls' wrestling team in competitions. And this is a guy named Mac Beggs, and because he self-identifies as a woman, and apparently he's starting the process to become a woman, he said, I want to wrestle with the girls' team. And the parents of one of the girls are suing, saying that this guy shouldn't be allowed to compete with the girls. And they're absolutely right. Now, let us leave the fantasy world of the Church of Liberalology and deal with some reality. No matter what a male does to become a woman, he is still a male. Bruce Jenner may have carved himself up and taken hormones to make himself look like a woman, but a DNA test would still show he is a male. And at the risk of pissing off the feminazis, the average male is quite a bit larger and stronger than the average female, even with the plumbing hacked off. Now, setting aside that this male wrestler will have an unfair advantage over his teammates and competitors, there does exist a real potential for bodily injury to the real girls wrestling with him. Apparently Trump is already yanking all of this Obama nonsense about the transgender bathrooms. Now, the American College of Pediatrics has released an official position that transgenderism of children is child abuse. Anybody who's getting a kid confused about their gender and then offering to sell them surgery and hormones and the rest of it, according to the American College of Pediatrics, this constitutes child abuse. And yes, when you hear about kids who are so young they can't possibly even know that much about gender identity, being convinced that this is the way they should go. It's the new big bucks opportunity for the medical industrial complex. It's amazing. Now, over in Anaheim, there has been a bit of a riot, and it's an anti-police riot, and it was triggered when some teenagers who had been repeatedly crossing over property belonging to somebody else, and the owner of the property kept saying, "Please do not cut across my land, you're killing my grass, stay on the sidewalks, you're not allowed on my property." And there was a confrontation in which the homeowner wanted to detain the ringleader of the teenagers for the police to arrive. The homeowner is also a cop, but he was off duty. And the other juveniles made a move to attack the homeowner. He pulled his gun and he discharged it into the ground. Nobody was hit by the bullet. And this triggered this anti-police riot. Well, again, in this case, the teens were clearly in the wrong. And the property owner is in the right, regardless of his status of a police officer. And yet the Black Lives Matter people are out there saying, "Oh, bad police, teenagers should be allowed to go into anybody's home that they feel they have a right to, and nobody should ever stop them." We've lost our way as a nation. We've lost our way because of all this liberal ideology, fantasy, nonsense. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to this show here. Now, you want to talk about the Veterans Administration with all the scandals they've had about neglecting our veterans, putting them on hold, fudging the record to make it look like they're being cared for when they're simply being abandoned to die. Huge amounts of money for artwork and various other things. And apparently, the Southern California VA facility brought charges against a 74-year-old U.S. Army veteran, and his crime was posting 2 6-inch American flags in the facility. And for some reason, the VA thought that was a problem. And they're hoping that Jeff Sessions is going to say this is ridiculous and drop it. And just let the guy go. By the way, I have a correction. Somebody sent me another article about the parents suing over the wrestler. Apparently, it's a woman who's in the process of becoming a man, but the concern is that this person is already taking testosterone and steroids and is already bulking up the muscle mass of a man, and so the logic still applies. But somebody else wrote on in and said, is pushing transgenderism on a child, does that make the parents guilty of Munchausen syndrome? And it might, by proxy. All right, let's talk a little bit about what's going on in California with all the rain. The good news is the water's receding in the Dayton retention pond. They were concerned about that, possibly having to evacuate people there. The heavy rains were continuing as of yesterday. The Oroville Dam, the water level is still low, but the 9 upstream dams protecting it are absolutely full. And we put a link on WhatReallyHappened.com to a list of all the California dams and their current status. A lot of them are absolutely at the top, well above the normal average for this time of year. So it's still intense. If another big storm comes on in, who knows what we'll see. Now, the issue is, even though the rain has stopped in that area, much of the water that fell on that Feather River watershed, the Oroville watershed, is still trickling down through the mountains and valleys. Because the issue is never the rain that falls in Lake Oroville itself, but the watershed, which is huge. And we could actually see a lot of water starting to come on down over the next several days. So we're going to have to be keeping an eye on that. Let's see. Interestingly enough, Governor Jerry Brown is now claiming that the potential failure of the Oroville Dam was not his fault, but it's blamed on human-caused global warming because the dam was built at a time when global warming wasn't happening and nobody expected that the world would warm and bring all this rain here. And it gets even more bizarre than that. More after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3 here, and everybody's looking for a scapegoat. You know, how could this be happening? And again, the foreign press was reporting cracks were discovered in the Oroville Dam spillway back in 2009. They were not repaired. They were simply painted over with a concrete solution. More than likely, what's been happening is as the water comes down the spillway, it's leaking through that patch, and it washed out a void in the soil underneath, leaving the spillway unsupported. When the void got large enough, the spillway failed. And interestingly enough, when Donald Trump was talking about his $1 trillion infrastructure project, Governor Jerry Brown sent a request for $100 billion worth of work to be done in California. The Oroville Dam was not even on it. But of course, California can spend $28 million a year caring for the illegal immigrants. And you people in Oroville better learn how to tread water. Now, it's even getting more bizarre than that. Somebody put up a YouTube video, and in between references to Lucifer, laid the blame for the California flooding on Hawaii. And they were pointing the finger of blame at the Puna geothermal venture down on the Big Island, saying it's releasing steam, it's releasing heat, it's doing all this, and that's the cause of the Pineapple Express and the sudden rains. Well, it's a little bit of nonsense there. First of all, the Puna geothermal venture, which provides about 1/3 of the electricity to the Big Island, has been operating since 1993, during all those years when California was screaming about the drought. Second, the plant does not create heat and it does not release steam. In fact, there was one accidental release of steam that resulted in a $75,000 fine. It generates electricity from already existing natural heat and steam, and these have not changed in output level for over 20 years. But like I said, everybody is looking for somebody or something to blame so that we don't look at poor decision-making by the political process. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Mark in Western New York, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon, Michael. I just wanted to make a correction on something I mentioned a couple days ago that got rebroadcast yesterday regarding the amount of nuclear storage at Rancho Seco. I said it was 22 million metric tons. That I misremembered. It was just 22 metric tons.
That's still a lot.
Yes, that was according to Wikipedia. Secondly, you had a theory on the cause of the spikes in radiation found in various European communities. I wanted to mention that there was another theory out there by Dana Burnford, who covered the Japan quake on the 28th of December, which was on land this time, about 6 miles down. It wasn't out to sea. And it was in that region, that eastern coastline, not too far from the Fukushima plant, which is 6.4, which is equivalent to 9.0 on our Richter. Nobody in the press covered that. He thinks that, I'm not exactly sure, but he thinks that that somehow has to do with the intense higher levels, anywhere up to.
Well, hang on. I need to put the brakes on here because somebody sent that to me, and I went to the USGS website, and there was no such quake reported. The latest word I've had is that they're beginning to think there was an accident at, oddly enough, an oil facility in Norway is somehow responsible for this release, but nobody really knows for sure right now until they get the sniffer planes in there. The point I wanted to make when the story first broke, everybody was just leaping to the conclusion Russia tested a nuclear weapon up there above the Arctic Circle, and I said, it's premature. We don't really know. And again, looking at all the accusations against Russia that have turned out to be completely wrong, we have to be cautious.
Sure.
Okay?
Absolutely.
All right, well, we're going to let you go here. Thank you very much for the phone call. Now, here's an interesting story. Apparently, several of the workers at the Oroville Dam have been fired for posting photographs to social media. Now, the California Department of Water Resources is saying that it wasn't the subject of the photos, but the act of taking photographs violated the safety policy, and if you believe that one, I've got some of Saddam's nuclear weapons to sell you. This idea that somebody takes out their cell phone and snaps a picture, no, I don't think so. I think they're trying to keep a lid on just how bad things are at that spillway, how badly out of repair it was, and the pictures have been an embarrassment. Certainly the official story is nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about, nothing to worry about, head for the hills, nothing to worry about, and the pictures indicate the serious state of disrepair that facility is now in. The loss of soil all downhill from the emergency spillway, undermining the emergency spillway itself, the huge amount of undercutting from the concrete main spillway into the berm that supports the northern end of the dam, and of course all that debris in the Feather River has backed up water into the power plant, shutting it off and blocking its flow channels as well. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Now, there is one positive story coming out of Oroville, because during the ordered evacuation last week, there was some looting, and there was this horrible story about a veteran who, on returning to his home, had discovered it had been ransacked, and all of his military medals had been stolen. And apparently he had a lot of decorations. Somehow they got returned today. And the story is a little bit fuzzy. Apparently, somebody just put these medals in the back of a pickup truck. The driver of the truck didn't know where they came from, but he'd heard the story about the medals and he turned them into police. But 2 people have been arrested for the burglary. That's all we have right now. Okay, let's see. More rain and so forth. We already talked about Puna geothermal. Syracuse, New York has topped 100 inches of snow with a month of winter remaining. And, of course, Puxatawny Phil is out there saying it's going to be, well, we're down to 4 more weeks of winter. But, yes, it is still out there. So much for all these claims. Back in 2000, snowfalls are now a thing of the past. Right now, today, if you are in Wyoming, stay indoors, stay where you are. We posted the list of highway closures, and pretty much the entire state is shut down by the winter storm they're going through right now. Now, there's a new piece of propaganda going around to try and prop up the human-caused global warming, and it's illustrated by a story that came out of Mashable that says, days after blistering heat wave, it's now snowing down under. And so what they're doing now is when it's snowing, they'll admit it's snowing, and when it's not snowing, they'll say, oh, our very expensive produced charts and everything are showing the temperatures are soaring. Still pushing that agenda, really. Now, speaking of pushing, story out of the Mirror in Great Britain. Apparently, Japan is trying to encourage the survivors of Fukushima to move back into their homes, even though the radiation levels in the area are similar to Chernobyl and are roughly the equivalent of having a chest x-ray every single week. But it looks bad to have all these abandoned homes. And, you know, we want everybody to forget about Fukushima, even though it's going to continue to pour radiation into the Pacific Ocean for as long as anybody can estimate. Can't fix the problem. We're just going to pretend like it isn't a problem anymore. Let's see. A story out of a YouTube video. The massive radiation leak pinpointed to State Oil, a Norwegian gas company. So that's the latest theory on where that radioactive spike across Europe came from. Now then, let's talk about some lies that our psychiatric professors in medical school have been teaching medical students. Lie number one, the FDA tests all new psychiatric drugs. That's not actually true. In fact, more and more the FDA relies on the manufacturer to say, this is safe and it's okay. Lie number two, FDA approval means that a psychotropic drug is effective in the long term. No, it is not. They never test in the long term. They test for a very short period of time, enough to where they're justified saying this is safe. And the long-term effects very often can be surprising. FDA approval means that a psychotropic drug is safe long-term. That is also false. It's all about pushing product, the medical industrial complex. Another story on that same topic out of Investment Watch blog. Apparently there is a big, huge problem with healthcare price fixing, where all these different HMOs, hospitals, and so forth are colluding to keep prices as high as possible to keep their profitability up. And the healthcare costs are completely out of control in this country. We have the most expensive healthcare on planet Earth, and it's ranked something like 33rd in quality. We need to get the healthcare industry back into thinking about health. By the way, speaking of which, somebody wrote in to remind me, Google search may not take you to naturalnews.com, but you can still visit the site itself, and you should. Naturalnews.com. I'm going to put up a permanent link to their website from mine after the show today here. Now, remember back in November, there was a hack against Deutsche Telekom. And when the hack happened, everybody said, oh, it was Russia. It's part of Russia's hacking. Russia's going to be interfering with the German elections. It's all Russia, Russia, Russia. Washington Post ran a story. Yes, there's no question it was Russia. Well, they found the hacker, and he's British. And Britain's National Crime Agency arrested this unidentified 29-year-old on Wednesday at an airport. Russia had nothing to do with it. The Washington Post said they did. Corporate media said that they did. Oh, it had to be Russia. No, it wasn't Russia. This is another example. Russia is being blamed for everything bad that happens as part of a campaign to demonize Russia. They're being blamed for things they did not do. Meanwhile, the American corporate media seems oblivious to a major scandal building inside the U.S. Congress. Because there was this trio of IT workers that have now been fired, and apparently they had access to the most secret congressional communications data, and apparently they were receiving money from Iraq over and above their very plush congressional IT salaries. They may have been selling secrets, leaking secrets. But if we can't blame it on Russia, we're not going to mention that at all. Now, interestingly enough, apparently recently, Homeland Security employees were locked out of their own computer system. And a lot of people were asking if this had anything to do with allegations the Department of Homeland Security was hacking voter databases in several states during last year's election. Homeland Security is now saying the problem arose from an expired DHS security certificate. That's their explanation. Now, cybercrime group RTM has deployed new malware based in the Delphi programming language to target remote banking systems, a type of business software used to make bulk financial transfers between banks, financial institutions, large corporations. The problem is severe enough to warrant an advisory from FinCERT, a Russian CERT responsible for fighting cybercrime targeting Russian financial institutions. Now, RTM is using its malware to spy on victims, monitoring keyboard strokes and smart cards, and it allows all-time monitoring of banking-related activities. And the malware apparently searches for export files common to popular accounting software, mainly used in Russia. Apparently this malware is a weapon being deployed against Russia's banks here. Okay, let's take a phone call. Dean in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks again for having me. I had 2 quick points. I wanted to ask, did you see the interview where Marie Le Pen was being interviewed by their version of corporate media there, and she addressed how important it was for her to get France back onto the franc because the true identity of a country is going to be able to rely on having their own currency and not rely on the euro?
Well, that's why Great Britain never went on the euro in the first place, and they stayed with the pound. I didn't see the interview, but I agree with Le Pen on that one.
They were playing it around a few different places, and they just tried to stump her and tried to talk circles around her. And she's better than Trump. I mean, she's so firm on her nationalism, and she really understands because she's seen it firsthand how much the European Union from every different angle is just really putting a squeeze on them. Like, they have to get Le Pen elected because this is their last chance, the same way Trump was our last chance. I mean, look at the alternative.
Well, we're coming up on several elections in Europe where the Eurosceptics, the Exeters, are leading in the polls. And at this point, I'd say it's really only a matter of time before the European Union experiment falls apart. And the euro itself could easily collapse. And I would assume that probably most of these European countries are already printing and stockpiling a domestic currency. We know that Germany started doing that actually a couple of years ago. They've got warehouses full of Deutschmarks ready to go.
Well, I think a lot of Americans forget how small a lot of these countries are. It's not going to be a huge conversion for them to switch back to their own currency when they only have populations of some of these only 10 to 40 million people. It's nothing.
Well, I mean, we've had currency conversions in the United States that went off very smoothly, like when we converted from the silver certificate to the Federal Reserve note. Hardly anybody really noticed because most people didn't understand what a dramatic change in our economic system was being foisted on them because the corporate media just said, money is money is money. There's no difference between this and the other one. I remember when I was a kid and they started introducing the copper-clad coinage after Kennedy's assassination. And they were just saying, see, it's our new coinage, and it's worth exactly the same, and, it's all going to be wonderful. And, of course, we know it wasn't worth the same, because with the silver coinage, the value was inherent in the coin itself, and with the clad coinage, the value is whatever the Federal Reserve decides it is.
Well, I think with a lot of attention, too, being back on the central bank and a lot of the currency, I really like that there's a new discussion and revival of the history of Andrew Jackson and people discussing all of the battles that he went through, fighting the central banks, a lot of his, anti-Hamilton and centralization policies. It's good for Americans to re-identify with the real founding fathers and the real good presidents we had in this country that were real men. I mean, Andrew Jackson came from nothing, wasn't educated, became the first general of the Tennessee militia, the first head judge of Tennessee, and he would ride his cart all the way to Philadelphia and worked his ass off to make sure that we would, that the state of Tennessee would stand for something, and then later as president. Yeah, and I think of everything that I've created over the last 24 years, my article on All Wars Are Bankers' Wars is the one that has reached the most people. And it really does carry that message that our country was hijacked by private bankers to turn the American people into debt slaves, to enrich these bankers with our labor, instead of enriching ourselves with our labor, which is what this country was originally supposed to be about. Mike, real quickly, I forgot to ask you, have you heard of the Joanne and John Marciano? They're the Libyan whistleblowers that were business people in Libya that witnessed all the war crimes, atrocities, and they have all the friends and tribesmen. They quoted All Wars Are Bankers' Wars on one of their interviews that I heard, and they would be the absolute perfect guest for you to have on the show. They're so well informed. and they have so many relationships in Libya. It was jaw-dropping to hear them.
I will try and get them on the show because
the website is called it's called, I have it on my phone, I should look it up, but it's all Libyans War or Libyans-War-Truth.com.
Can you
real quick,
we have to take a break for commercials. Email me the URL for their website, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently, despite all the problems at the Iranian fuel rod plant, the suspected problems at Fukushima caused by these digital controllers, there doesn't seem to have been a lot of work focused on making them more secure against malware like Stuxnet. So we're looking at this article in the Register over in Great Britain, and basically says that these controllers are still running on one of the world's oldest programming styles. It's called ladder logic, and it's still the core of software in industrial programmable logic controllers, and it's dangerously vulnerable to attack. And they're saying that basically in order to avoid another Stuxnet, that it's time to find ways to secure these digital controllers, to make them more unique to their immediate installation, so that a general purpose tool has less ability to get at them. But again, my question would be, where is the National Security Agency and all this cybercrime that's going on? All this ransomware that's going on? The NSA is proving itself to be a complete waste of money, totally incompetent, or criminally complicit, because they don't do a thing about any of it. They certainly got that British hacker that hacked into Germany's Deutsche Telekom. Another story coming out of the Register. The Dutch studied their online bank security and found out it's not very good. These systems are wide open. I got an idea. Let's go back to having coinage with intrinsic value, some kind of commodity, or paper claim checks for convenience, and just go into a store, hand them the money, take your product, go home, everybody happy. The more we are forced onto these electronic systems by the banks for their convenience, the more at risk we are. None of this is for our benefit or our security and our safety. It's about maintaining control. It's about enforcing dependency. It's about creating a world in which you will need your bank's permission just to buy a candy bar. Talk about dictatorship. Even Adolf Hitler didn't go around telling people, you may not have that donut, you may not have that sausage. Now, former President Jimmy Carter is walking his talk. He's in support of alternative forms of energy, and he's just leased 10 acres of his farmland to build a 1.3 megawatt solar power station. When it is completed, it will provide more than half of the electric power needs of Plains, Georgia. So good for him. He's actually walking his talk. Kind of an interesting story here. We all know about the cloud. We've been told about the cloud. The cloud is this, the cloud is that. And it's just another level of abstraction, which to the end user means you don't really know where your data and your applications happen to be at any one moment. They're constantly in flux. Basically, the cloud took the level of the client server, and they basically blurred all the servers together into a single uniform space. There have been some mistakes with it. And as usual, there are some companies that just want to do things their way to try and maintain some kind of proprietary control. I remember when the Ethernet first came on out, everybody was conforming to the Ethernet standard except for Apple. They had Apple Talk, and it was very, very difficult getting those early Apple computers to go on to a Unix Ethernet and operate correctly. And apparently it's happening again, because apparently Apple's iOS is having integration issues with third-party cloud services. Now, if you want to go to Apple's cloud, no problem. Whoop. Here's the music, a little bit loud. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently they're having the Stoke Britain by-election, and they're already out there saying that Twitter bots linked to Russia are targeting UKIP. Russia's the new bad guy. Anything bad happens, it was Russia. Waxy yellow buildup in your kitchen floor, Russia. Can't find your socks, Russia took them. Meteor crashes into the ground, Russia did it. Russia has a meteor gun. It's really ridiculous. Now then, every morning when I get up, one of the first things I do is I say the word Alzheimer's to reassure myself I don't actually have it. But obviously it's something people worry about. And there's a new study showing that too much sugar can actually lead to a larger chance of Alzheimer's, developing Alzheimer's. And it had been noticed before that diabetics have increased risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and vascular dementia. But apparently there is a point between blood glucose, rented lips, blood glucose, and brain disease, and too much blood sugar levels can be dangerous because they allow the neurological disease to take hold. Another reason to go easy on the sugar in your diet here. Now then, little bit of corruption question here going on. Remember Jesse Jackson, Jr.? And he was a former representative. He's disgraced because he got sent to prison for 2.5 years for looting $750,000 from his own campaign funds. You're not supposed to do that. Kind of a tacky situation. Well, he spent 2.5 years in prison, and he came on out claiming that his time in prison had made him depressed and bipolar, and he's claiming disability benefits of $138,400 a year from the federal government. And it's caused a bit of a stink. They published the details up in the Chicago Tribune, and they're saying, does this guy really, is he eligible for the money? How is he eligible for this much money? I mean, this idea that, you get sent to jail, and you can come on out and say, well, the prison experience damaged me mentally, therefore I'm on disability. I think along with all this nonsense we're getting from John McCain, it just shows us the kind of people who are drawn to these political offices. And I've said it many, many times. The curse of political power is that it attracts the very people who should not be allowed to have it. We're going to take a phone call here from Tom in Minnesota. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I was wondering on that Alzheimer's sugar, did they make a distinction between the GMO or the cane sugar?
No, they did not. Basically, they're talking about blood glucose levels. So it's the glucose form of sugar that they were concerned with. I don't think they went into a sucrose or fructose or any of the other alternative sugars. It was specifically refined glucose sugar seemed to have a point where too much of it helps these neurological diseases take hold of your brain.
Yeah, I still am a diabetic, I guess you could say, but I defeated it by avoiding the high fructose corn syrup. In fact, my doctor literally started shaking and gave me a high five and said I knew someone could do it with diet, and I was surprised. I'm the only one that tried the diet. And it's like the soybeans, GMO, and high fructose corn syrup. And I started testing all the time, literally every half hour after I ate. And I found out that like an orange juice will shoot it up, but orange with the pulp really leveled it out.
Yes.
And kind of sugars like that, too. Cane sugar isn't a lot, of course, wouldn't be good for you, but it's quite a bit different than the GMO sugar. I discovered that.
Well, I don't think they have a GMO sugar cane yet. I think the GMO sugar is from a sugar beet, and I'm not sure exactly which sugars those are. It may be more the kind of sugar that's involved than whether it's GMO or not. But then again, if the sugar is being malformed, then that could be an issue as well. I know for myself, I can handle most sugars without any difficulty whatsoever. But I was dealing with a period in time where I seemed to be getting hypoglycemic on a regular basis. And the doctors were saying, oh, we're going to put you on this medicine, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then I realized it was the high fructose corn syrup that was causing it. And so I avoid high fructose corn syrup, and I've never had any problems since then. So it's the kind of sugar that's involved. And again, it's a reminder, the products being sold in the store aren't necessarily what's best for you, but what's most profitable for the corporations, because everybody loves high fructose corn syrup. It's very inexpensive to produce. It lasts a very long time on the shelves, so you have less spoilage and loss that way. And that's why they've settled on high fructose corn syrup as the sweetener, even though it's not as good for you as some of the other plant-based sugars.
Yep. If it doesn't say cane sugar, it's GMO.
Well, out here in Hawaii, we got lots and lots of cane sugar around.
Oh, there you go.
Not as much as we used to, unfortunately. All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, getting on back to the sanctuary city issue, there's a bunch of stories coming on out here. And liberalism is really starting to implode here. Apparently, Phoenix City Council has voted down a measure that would have turned the state capital into a sanctuary city. They're basically saying this has gone far enough. Apparently, over on CNN, Chris Cuomo criticized a father who said that he would prefer not to see his daughter to see a man's penis while changing in the girls' locker room over this whole transgender thing. And Chris Cuomo saying, you're being intolerant. I think the dad has certain rights as a dad. And I think if you're going to have sexually segregated locker rooms in the school, they should be sexually segregated. And Chris Cuomo is definitely part of the liberal problem out there. We're going to take another phone call. Sherry from Fredericksburg. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to say something about the beet. It was about beet sugar. I went to our health food store, and they had some beet sugar, and they were saying it's organic, and I couldn't agree with that. So I asked for a printout of different sugars, and it's really interesting. The sucrose level in table sugar, what they call table sugar, that you're going to find in your products, it's a processed sugar, not cane sugar. It's almost 4 times as much as the sucrose level in regular cane sugar. In other words, instead of putting a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee, you're putting almost 4 teaspoons in your coffee. So it had a lot higher level, and really, well, you might say 3 times plus. You know, I don't want to exaggerate. I can't remember. I didn't keep the printout. I wish I did, because people could look it up, and it might still be there. Google hasn't got it. Well, I don't know, but I just thought I'd say that. It was a lot higher. The sucrose level was a lot higher for the table sugar.
Well, again, there's all these different kinds of sugar. Here in Hawaii, fortunately, we're able to get evaporated cane sugar, which it's not even white. It's a light tan, but it is pure cane sugar. There's nothing else in it, and that works very, very well for us. But over the years, under the excuse of diet aids, there's some very dangerous things that have been put out, such as saccharin. We know that aspartame has got serious, serious problems. Aspartame actually helps you gain weight. It doesn't help you lose weight. It makes you gain weight. So, You know, it's again, the corporations are not selling products that are what's best for you, but simply what's most profitable for them.
Yeah, right, and I also noticed that when people buy the regular cane sugar, it never had a few years ago a sell-by date on it, because I don't know that cane sugar would need a sell-by date. It can be used as a preservative, but since they brought in this table sugar next to it, and of course it was a lot cheaper, it was really your modified sugar, and no telling what fillers were in there. They had a sell-by date on it, and they started putting that same sell-by date on the, this is just one store I noticed, the same sell-by date was appearing on the cane sugar, and I thought, I don't trust that. You know what I'm saying?
Well, cane sugar, properly stored, cane sugar does last a very, very long time. That's why in the early days of Hawaii, the main agricultural exports were, cane sugar and coconuts, because they could survive the long sea voyage back to the American mainland without needing special refrigeration or anything.
Yeah, and I think they wanted people to think, oh, your regular cane sugar isn't going to last any longer than ours is, and I don't think that's how it was.
Well,
you know what I see? They want, in other words, they shouldn't have put any sell-by date on cane sugar. It's just that it was alongside their table sugar.
Well, let me tell you something about the sell-by dates. For certain kinds of products like meat and dairy, that sell-by date is very important, because the products will go bad after that, regardless of how they're stored and preserved. For some other products, the sell-by date is really about we guarantee its freshness and flavor to this date, and after that it may not be. But that doesn't mean it's not good to eat. A lot of preppers understand that these rules are out there. But very often these sell-by dates are there to encourage you to throw away perfectly good food and go to the store and buy some more to replace it. So, again, for meat and dairy, you've got to follow those sell-by dates. For canned fruits and vegetables and certain other things, and certainly for sugar, the sell-by dates can be ignored to a certain extent.
And I think maybe the stores ignore some things to a certain extent, too, because I bought something that had 3 or 4 days left that was chicken. Now it's not like this. I'm getting good chicken now, but this was a while back. And I punctured that wrapping, and boy, you could smell it had been. And I was told something by someone in the meat department that I won't repeat. Because I can't prove it.
Well,
but,
I know what you're talking about.
It
depends on the store. Some stores have been caught simply fudging the sell-by date on unsold product to try and get it out the door in the hope that people will buy it, take it home, and cook it that very night. But we've even gotten that here from our local market, where we'll get something and it's obviously spoiled, and we'll peel the little label and we'll find another price label underneath it with a different sell-by date. So there's a lot of chicanery going on in that quest for profitability, or these days just simple survival. And this need for pieces of ink and paper to keep the bankers happy it has undermined our moral compass in this country.
It really has.
It really has. Okay?
And yes. Thank you. I think we should stick to cane sugar and pay that little bit extra.
We should all pay extra to be getting as healthy food as we possibly can. Unfortunately, under the economic pressures, more and more people are having to just buy the junk food, and because it's all they can afford after they're done paying their Obamacare insurance premiums and medical costs and everything. And we're starting to see some of these stores that did deal with healthier foods start to go out of business because people just can't afford to go there any longer. The biggest problem we have right now is between Fukushima and the Deepwater Horizon disaster. There may not be enough safe, healthy food on planet Earth to feed the current human population. And so we're getting into Soylent Green kind of country right now.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you. We're going to let you go and switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha, Alex. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Not much, Mike. What's the diddly-dory, and how are you doing?
Well, you know...
thank you for taking... Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I was calling about vault number 7. What do you think? Do you think it's going to reveal something? Do you think it's a lot of smoke, blown up our rear ends, or what do you think?
Well, at this point, I tend to ignore stories that are predicting or announcing something is going to happen, and I'm going to wait for something to actually be revealed and happen, and then I'm going to report on it. That's why I waited on the Project Veritas audios coming on out from CNN. We got the heads up about it a couple of days ago, but again, so many of these things turn out to be smoke. So when WikiLeaks actually comes out with something, then we're going to report on it. But this Vault 7 thing, it feels like grandstanding, and there are some times when, Julian Assange has done a lot of really good work, or WikiLeaks has done a lot of good work, and there are other times when it seems like they're just out after publicity, and this feels like one of them.
Yeah. Well, the thing is what I was thinking is that maybe he needs to do some grandstanding and get people to pay attention, because basically none of the mainstream media is actually reporting on most of his email leaks. I mean, we get his information from guys like you and other independent radio.
Well, we were able to get it into the corporate media last year because there was an investigation going on, and the corporate media couldn't be seen to completely ignore the story. But you're right. These days, the independent media is actually doing the traditional job of media, which is to act as a watchdog on government abuse. And the corporate media, and that includes obviously Google now, are totally on board with supporting the status quo. And it's for that reason they're losing audience share. They've been caught artificially inflating click numbers and viewership numbers and readership numbers, trying to stay relevant. And now, of course, it's open warfare on the independent media, trying to find some way to discredit us, sue us out of existence, find some way to cut us off or silence us. And it is so obvious people are, in fact, noticing that's what's going on.
That's right. I tell people when they try to tell me that the independent media is the fake news, I try to let them know, if you think that 6 media outlets have all the real news of the world and the 7 billion people that may have some other news are irrelevant, anyone that believes that's crazy.
Just ask
everyone.
Just ask these people, who told you Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons, which turned out to be a lie. That generally gets the point across. We're going to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Got one more caller waiting for the last segment of our program today, and then we're going to be going into the first hour of John Stadmiller's show. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program here, and we're going to take one final phone call from Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. For your audience, please look up who attacked the USS Liberty on June 8th of 1967. This same group has infiltrated our government, has infiltrated and takes over, controls many of, not most of our corporations. Here's a connect the dots moment, Mike. You may have heard of that company, GMO stuff. Let's see, Monsanto?
Yes.
They're headquartered in St. Louis, but they have a research arm in Chesterfield, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of this company called Amdocs? It's been in the news lately about, Amdocs and Converse. Converse is no longer around, but they were taken over by another corporation. But Amdocs is the one with the intelligence, having the apparatus to be able to listen in on conversations.
Oh, absolutely. Well, no, actually, Amdocs and Converse were connected with Israeli intelligence, and they became very well known back just before 9/11. When the FBI uncovered the largest foreign spy ring operating inside the United States in our nation's history, and they were working for Israel. And the reason the spy ring became known is because American drug enforcement officers were having their arrests and their stings compromised, and it came on out that now Amdocs does processing of phone bills for America's phone companies, which means they know who's calling who when. Converse Infosys was the company that had put in the system to allow law enforcement to listen to phone calls without having to go in there with alligator clips like the good old days. and it was thought that Converse still had a backdoor into the system because somehow these Israeli drug dealers were getting advance warnings of stings, and apparently the information was being literally siphoned right off the pagers of the DEA officers. Yeah. And that led to the exposure of this huge spy ring.
Yeah. Well, here's another connect the dots here, okay? Yes. It is Israeli erected, if you ask me. Look into who found Amdocs. You can look it up. You can find it on Wikipedia, although I don't trust Wikipedia 100%. There is some good information there. It was founded in 1982 along with Converse, sister companies, and Chesterfield is also it's the oldest organization, the congregation of these people who are from that special place, the chosen people. Mm-hmm. It's the oldest west of the Mississippi. It's the oldest. Now, there's a lot of interesting things happening out of St. Louis, including, the St. Louis incident with Ferguson. So these are distractions away from them. And by deception, they shall do war. That's their motto of their intelligence agency, the Mossad.
Yes.
By way of deception, they shall do war. And
all
that's
right.
what
Well,
they're doing on us.
I'm going to have to cut you off because that's the end of the show here. So thank you very much for that. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a station identification break. We're going to be right back here with the first hour of John Stadmiller's show. So stay tuned.